dividing Bethlehem, which is in the Palestinian territory, from Jerusalem. And in order to get into Jerusalem, you have to cross through this checkpoint. As a tour bus, we didn't have a whole lot of trouble going through the checkpoint, but sometimes it did take half an hour. Our hotel was right on the wall. We were not far from the checkpoint at all. On the Palestinian side, it's all painted. And you can see some of the they call us not walls. So that was kind of interesting to see that commentary. There are different colored license plates issued to people who live in the Palestinian territories and in Jerusalem. One day when they seemed to be particular sticklers, we saw a car pulled off on the side where a man who clearly couldn't walk, he had trouble with his legs, was being transferred from one kind of car to a different kind of car because they needed him to get through probably for a doctor's appointment. And we'll talk more about that later. There was also some very stylized art like this. You see this dove in a bulletproof jacket. It was kind of interesting. I saw this right next to our hotel, and I needed to get together with a friend of a friend. As many of you know, I have a friend who likes to do some ghost writing on some of my sermons. She does some editing and tells me when she hates it. So that's super fun. She's actually also very helpful during the holidays. She really likes Easter and Christmas best. And her name is Dina Preacheth, and she is an NPR writer. And she is good friends with the NPR correspondent from Jerusalem, Daniel Estrin, and really wanted us to get together. And because I did not take any of her suggestions on Christmas, I really thought I should make it happen because she thought I was way too sentimental this year. So I needed a place to get together with Daniel, so I asked our tour guides, he lives in Jerusalem, I don't know if I can really cross this wall, I have a feeling they don't want me to, where should we meet? And they said, oh, you should meet at the Waldorf Hotel. And I was like, what? The Waldorf Hotel. And I said, Waldorf? No, the Walled-Off Hotel. No. Which is a Banksy project. Do you know the British graffiti artist Banksy? He bought a hotel on the wall. And the theme is, it's the hotel with the worst view in the world. And it's a hotel with something like 12 rooms. And each of the rooms has a worse view than the other of the wall, and fancy people from all over the world come to spend $500 a night to stay there because it is the largest collection of Banksy art in the world. The whole lower floor is a Banksy gallery. There's a museum of the occupation, and then there's a Palestinian art gallery of modern Palestinian artists. But you can see this caution children playing with barbed wire, it says. That's like a Banksy graffiti piece there. This is inside the lobby. You can see the commentary. There's angels with air masks, 2 goldfish in a bowl looking at each other from either side. And here's a very dark picture of me and Daniel Estrin talking in the very fancy lobby. It was really interesting to meet with Daniel. He's been in Jerusalem for 12 years. He went right to Jerusalem from Brandeis, where he majored in Hebrew and Arabic. He's a raised in a Boston Jewish family. His boyfriend is a Palestinian Muslim. And you can't get married in Israel unless it's a religious wedding. But Israel will recognize weddings done elsewhere. So a lot of people get married in Cyprus and then come back to Israel to live. And same-gender weddings are totally fine. You get all the benefits of a regular wedding, provided you just go to do it in Cyprus and don't do it in Israel. And people aren't quite sure whether gay people should get married, but Daniel told me the one thing people in Israel are sure of is that they should have children. So Daniel's housekeeper was giving him a really hard time about not having kids yet, and you better hurry up. So there you have it. And it was really interesting talking to him. Daniel said, he feels a lot of pressure to get the story right, because he knows for many people this might be the only thing they hear about. His beat is the Holy Lands, the Gaza Strip, the occupied territories, and Israel. And so anyway, that's what he does. We went to the ubiquitous olive wood shop, owned by my brother, that kind of thing. And as I learned in media, don't hate the player, hate the game. A lot of Palestinians only can make money this way. So this shop had some very expensive, very fancy olive wood. I did not bring back the giant nativity, either in mother of pearl or in olive wood, sorry folks. But I did bring back this one that I want to show you, which I thought was pretty cool. This is the Nativity, Bethlehem. There are the three kings, and do you see what's between them? That's the wall. That's just what it looks like. And this is really what the three kings would have to pass through if they had gone to see Herod in Jerusalem and were going to Bethlehem to see the baby Jesus. So you can pass that around and check that out. Our tour guides were not at all bitter, which I was kind of surprised about. Like I would have expected there would have been a lot of propaganda, and there really wasn't. They just told it like it was. This is our life. I thought it was interesting. When we visited Elias Shakur, he said, it's not going to work if you come here and hate Jews. He said, if you hate Jews, you cannot be my brother. I need everybody to work together on this. Which I also thought was interesting, given his experience too. He was trying to build a high school for Palestinian kids and could not get it built and could not get the permits. The Israeli government would not give them the permits to build it. So finally, out of desperation, he went to Washington, D.C. and knocked on James Baker's door, where he met James Baker's wife, and through a series of improbable events got invited in to do a Bible study. And James Baker got him the permits. He says in Palestine, we sometimes say the shortest route to Jerusalem is through Washington.
Pastor, I missed the beginning. Were your tour guides both Israeli and Palestinian?
No, they were Palestinian Christians. So we did not do a lot of Jewish experiences. So that's one thing that would be really interesting to do on the other side. This is breakfast. I sent this picture to Betty because she would really like this breakfast. There's a hard-boiled egg, there's some cucumbers, there's some cheese, and there's a bun and some juice, and of course coffee. So in Bethlehem, you have to go to the Church of the Holy Nativity. Now I had read about the Church of the Holy Nativity. Madeline Lenagel has an article about going there and about how awful it was, and that's entirely what I expected. I expected this to be an awful Orthodox church plunked on top of a place where supposedly Jesus was born. And it turned out to be pretty great. They had finished a bunch of renovations recently, restorations, and it also was, I think it was Greek Orthodox New Year when we were there, which meant that the Armenians were having a service in the church, which meant that a lot of tourists didn't come because they weren't exactly sure when it would open. Which was really cool for us because this is the door. The story goes that the Crusaders made it really tiny so people couldn't bring their camels in.
That's a good reason.
It's a good reason. Camels are notoriously difficult to clean up after. I would love to learn more about that, but that's the story I heard, so I'm passing it on to you. I do think that there is something about a lot of these places about ducking under the humility, realizing your smallness in the face of God, which I think is kind of cool. There's also a thing that the ancient world was below us because, of course, the ground builds up over time. They build roads on top of roads. So I wonder if this was a more reasonably sized door and the ground just got higher. That's also a possibility. But you can see us coming through that little door and into this Orthodox church. It reminded me a lot of Ravenna. Has anybody been to Ravenna? Some of these mosaics they're beautiful, gold, recently restored. They found a whole extra angel when they did it because they've got all these oil lamps. Do you see all the oil lamps in the middle here? And when they're all going full blast, you get a lot of soot. A lot of them have been replaced with electric light bulbs because I think after they did the restoration, they were like, this is really nice. Down the middle of the church, you see that there's this like metal bar walkway. That's because the floor has all these cool mosaics under it that they're discovering through archaeological work. And that's cool to see. I don't know what it must be like to worship there on Christmas. I don't know quite how you put people in there, but the next time somebody gets annoyed at where the font is, just remember, at least we don't have mosaic floors, we're restoring them. Here's the floor up close. So you can see there's been a church here for a really long time. Some of these churches can date their provenance back to when Constantine's mother, St. Helena, came. and started building churches in the Holy Land sites. And that would have been, around the year 300. So there are some evidences of churches being in some of these places since then. I believe the Church of the Holy Nativity is the church with the longest evidence of continual Christian worship. There's the front of the church. You can see it in all of its Orthodox glory. A lot of gold, a lot of smoke, a lot of icons. Here's one of the icons. It's hard to see in this picture. This is the Virgin Mary. And there's a string here. And on the string there are all these necklaces that were donations. So somebody dropped their pearl necklace in the box. And now it's hung here, adoring Mary. And this is where we waited for a really long time for the shrine underneath to open. The cool thing about having tour guides who knew the area, who knew the people, is that they just talked to the priest and said, when are you going to be done? And they were like, I don't know, about an hour. Cool, we'll just wait here. And then our tour guide took us in little groups to the next door church, which is a Roman Catholic church. This is where the Christmas Mass is always done from, in Bethlehem, that's broadcast in this much sunnier, more modern church. And underneath, so the Shrine of the Holy Nativity is in a cave underneath the main altar in the Russian Orthodox Church. But next door, there are also shrines. I mean, these churches share a wall. So they're right on top of each other. And they have two distinct shrines. One of them is the tomb of St. Jerome, the early translator of the Bible into Latin, who lived in a cave and contemplated death and translated the Bible. This is his grave, and right next to it is the site that they say is the Tomb of the Holy Innocents. So all the babies that were killed in Bethlehem after Jesus escaped to Egypt. Finally, it was our turn, and there it is, the place where Jesus was born. Right. Touch that rock. It's in sort of it looks like a fireplace. There's this like curtained area, and you bend over and you touch the place. This is a star donated by France. Here's an interesting thing. So the Armenians had their service, and then something happened. Monks came from the Catholic side, monks came from the Russian side, and they met in the middle. And we were told, oh, this is the way it works, because a lot of these different religions all have control, so they always go in to make sure everything is exactly the way it was. This is where we get the term status quo from. They're maintaining the status quo, the way things are, lest anybody get any control. The space, the chapel in here is all lined in these leather panels that are painted. It is a weirdly masculine place full of a lot of men to celebrate where a woman once gave birth to our Lord. But it was still pretty cool to be there and to think of all the Christians who've come here over time to worship in this place. You can probably turn off the speaker if you turn that button right behind you to 0. Yeah.
Do they really have It goes beyond that's 0 to high. Yeah.
Is it that's the spot? I mean, have they done digs and they've carved it was 12
What they know is that Christians have been worshiping there since the 4th century.
That's usually what the...
And, I mean, what would you find? I think that's the real question, right?
Yeah.
They know there are natural caves, it might be in the nursery, that were inhabited. And so that's why they think it's there. Now, I tend to believe that it seems a little convenient. If I were a Palestinian Christian living in the area when Constantine's mother was coming around looking for places to build fancy churches, I might say, oh, for sure, right over here. Especially if my brother-in-law owned the field. But there is...
So that's like where the barn was.
Yeah, that's where they say that these stables were really caves because they didn't have wood. They had rock and they had caves. And so these caves were the places where these things probably happened. That seems legit to me. And I think that you have to get into a headspace where you say, okay, the fact that Christians have been worshiping here for 1,700 years counts. You know? Even if this is not the magic piece of wood that Jesus lay in, that there's something about that faithfulness coming through for all that time that makes it a sacred place. And being there with all those pilgrims is pretty exciting. I mean, it makes your Christian world feel bigger, that everybody behind you is speaking Polish. And then there were all of these giant Nigerian tour groups. Because apparently the Nigerian government, I have to check this out, this is what we were told, that there's some sort of reparations deal where everybody in Nigeria gets one free trip to either Jerusalem or Mecca. And so there were all of these big groups of Nigerians.
It's like the Jews' birthright though, too.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know.
My
It's-
son-in-law went. and
Yeah,
so
yeah,
his brother.
right. So
get to
there
go.
are Jewish tour groups too going through. There are, not the Christian sites per se. I was curious about, like when we were at the place of the slaughter of the prophets of Baal, I wondered if Jews came there. I think not. I wonder where their place is. You know, if they count a different place. There was definitely a giant Franciscan church there, and I don't know that Jewish people would want to remember.
So they always would try to match up people. In other words, you know, you go as a Jew that's signed up for the birthright and hope you're gonna find another female Jew.
Right.
And therefore preserve the.
The legacy. We went up to the Shepherd's Fields. This is my roommate. Her name is Ann. She's a deacon in South Carolina. And she got handed a lamb and took a picture. So, there are a lot of ruins that are being excavated up there, but this is a natural cave, so this would have been one of those kinds of caves where shepherds might have kept their sheep while they were trying to keep out of the weather. Or a place like that might become a stable where Jesus was born. And we had a little lecture in here. There were little cutouts in the ceiling that were shaped like stars. And this is where we started singing everywhere we went, which is something that Christian groups do. It was kind of cool to see the Catholic groups who had all the masses memorized, because they would just do mass. They wouldn't have any paper, they would just do it. So that was kind of awesome. We mostly sang Christmas songs we could do. We did A Mighty Fortress in the Lutheran Church, so it's fun. Then we went to Jericho. This is where it looked exactly what I thought it would look like. That's what the road to Jericho looks like. It is a deserty desert. There are no trees. There are little groups of Bedouins who are not living in tents, they're living in RVs. But there were camels. And that was pretty cool because that's exactly what I thought it was going to be like. And as we were on the long bus ride to the Jordan River, which, I don't know why this never occurred to me before, the Jordan River is the border with Jordan. So when you go there, but it didn't, of course, used to be a border. Jesus walked across the Jordan all the time. When we met with Elias Shakur, the Greek Catholic archbishop, he said, "Don't ask me how my father crossed the Jordan and what kind of boat he used. He just walked. It's not very big." And sometimes it's rather, they had a lot of rain and actually snow up in the mountains. So the Jordan was high while we were there, which was kind of cool. And while we were on the bus, a couple of the women from Michigan who knew me from Facebook said, "We are tired of hearing all these men talk. How about you talk now, Kate?" And I said, "Okay, I will talk at the River Jordan." And so we're in the bus and our tour guide says, "Would anybody like to give a talk?" And I said, "I will." And he said, "Would anybody like to talk?" And I said, "That would be me." And he said, "Anybody at all?" And the women in front of us said, "Katie will do the talk at the River Jordan." Okay, so we got down to the River Jordan, and that's what it looked like. That's exactly what I thought it should look like, don't you think? It's really cool. And that's the Jordanian site over there. And and when we got there, it was full of Russians doing some memory of baptism thing. I love their t-shirts. I could have bought one of those t-shirts, I totally would have. It's just the weirdest thing I've ever seen. You know, like but this was their thing. They were going down and getting in the Jordan. And then I stood at the Jordan and I gave a little talk. And it was awesome, people. I didn't crowd. It was a really good talk. And after I finished giving my little sermonette on the River Jordan, the Palestinian tour guide came up to me and said, "You are very good at this." And I said, "I've been pastor for 15 years. If you can't give a talk at the River Jordan, you better hang up your skirts." And he said, "Maybe you would like to talk again tomorrow." And I said, "Sure, I will be happy to talk again tomorrow." And that was pretty fun to get that. And he said, I hear a lot of people talk, and I mostly don't like to listen to them. So it was a big confessional moment. But one of the things I talked about that I just loved as a visual is that this was right on the Jordanian border. And you remember there've been a bunch of wars, right? So the whole area is mined. These are all minefields. And they're gradually removing the mines. But what a symbol, because you remember what happened to Jesus after he was baptized, right? He went out and was tempted. And so I said, look, we are entering a literal minefield. I mean, it just preaches itself. And so there we were, and I had everybody do that thing that we do in First Communion and with the kids, where everybody get the water and then name each other beloved children of God. Went over big. Then we went down to the Dead Sea. On the way to the Dead Sea, this is the area where John the Baptist was preaching, where Jesus was tempted, and where the caves of Qumran are. That's where they are, in these hills. The Dead Sea Scrolls come from here. And then we went to the Dead Sea, which was totally weird. We got there, and there's a big resort at the top, like a fancy resort, like the sort of resort that you could see anywhere. And there was a Moroccan restaurant, and there was a place where you could get massages, and there were places you could get pomegranate juice, and a lot of stairs. Because the Dead Sea is about a fifth of the size it once was. Because of the damming of the Jordan and climate change, and the sea has just receded and receded and receded. And so a lot of the resorts have closed because of sinkholes, because the sea has receded. But this one is still in existence, and there were camels you could ride and all kinds of things. And it was very windy, but I was going to have a life experience. So I changed my clothes, and I got my swimsuit, and I went down into the Dead Sea. And it was awful. It was this really icky mud that you would take a step and sink into up your knees. Unless, of course, you hit the sharp, pointy rocks, which are also in there. And they had warned everyone. They said, men and women, nobody shave today. Because any little cuts. And they said, there were all these signs saying, warning, do not get any in your eyes, warning, do not drink any of the water, warning, do not look at the water, So you go down, it is floaty enough that they have pictures. Now, it was a windy day, so we could not have done this. Of people just sitting and reading a book in the water, because it's got so many minerals and the salt content is so great. I would not have tried to. I was just trying to keep myself from hitting the sharp, pointy rocks.
What was the temperature that day?
It was not warm, but it was so low that it was warmer. So I think that in Jerusalem it was 40 degrees. Down here it was probably 60.
Wow.
The oxygen content is much greater. This is the lowest point in the world above the ocean, and it's below sea level. So. People did put the mud on their faces and stuff. It was enough just to have been near the sea. I mean, my lips hurt on the edges from the salt. It was really nice to get out and to take a shower. Behind me, I don't have a good picture of him, but the guy behind me in the ocean, that's my buddy Arnie. Arnie and I were trip buddies. He's the senior pastor of the church in Helena, Montana, and a straight shooter. And we had a good time together. This is the Mount of the Temptation. They say this is the place where Jesus was tempted by Satan to jump from this place. And there's a monastery up there. There is also a less photogenic Swiss cable car that will get you there. So I didn't take a picture of that because that was not in my imagination. But it was. Long day. The next day, we went up to the Mount of Olives. And here is Augusta Victoria. Yay, Lutherans. Augusta Victoria is located in what was East Jerusalem, now is controlled by the Israelis. It was built by Kaiser Wilhelm, and as I walked in, I said to the person next to me, yeah, this pretty much looks like my church. It's all mosaics and gold, but with nice German touches. They have a very attractive nativity. And they have the star, like we have.
Oh, yeah.
And in case you were wondering, they have the ark. If you're looking for it, there it is. We were met by a representative
Open the ark.
from the Lutheran World Federation, which has control over Augusta, Victoria. The Lutheran World Federation was founded, as was LWR, in the wake of World War II. And after World War II, when a lot of the German territories all around the world were going to be divided among the Allies, the Germans transferred ownership to this newly formed group, Lutheran World, the Lutheran World Federation. And Lutheran World Federation said, and one of our big jobs, and this is what Lutheran World Relief did too, post-World War II, is to take care of refugees. Lutheran World Relief states that after World War II, 1 in 5 Lutherans were refugees. So this has been a continued source of work for the Lutheran World Federation, and so Augusta, Victoria built a hospital. And it's one of the few hospitals that serves Palestinians. And it's one of the few hospitals that serves Palestinians and does certain kinds of therapies. Their specialty is radiation. And so people who need radiation treatment in anywhere in all of Palestine come to Augusta, Victoria to get it. One of our members, one of the group members, one of the Christian Zionists said, well, why don't you just build another hospital in Jericho? And the nice Finnish lady who was giving the talk said, no one in Jerusalem will let nuclear material go to Jericho. You can't build a radiation machine there. She also said to us, look, if you filled this whole room with Palestinians and you asked them, under whose control, authority would you like to be, under the Palestinian Authority or the Israeli Authority? They would tell you the Israeli Authority. That the issues with organization and bribery are really problematic in the Palestinian territory. And that's one of the reasons that Augusta, Victoria is so crucial that they can do this work that they can do. Now the problem is, in order to get here, you have to pass through all those gates and boundary walls. And they said about a quarter of their patients do not get the papers they need to come through. And once you come, you pretty much have to stay, because what if you don't get in tomorrow? So although they have only 130 beds, they have 700 patients at any given time that are staying there in hotels and around. They've tried to build housing. The Israeli government will not give them permits. They've spent over $1 million on permitting for building a larger hospital. They tried to build housing for their Palestinian workers. That also would not pass through. It's not just the Lutherans that are supporting this, although we are. Part of your tithes and offerings goes to do this kind of work. But the money for the new hospital was entirely donated by the Saudi Arabian government. Except they won't pay for permits, because they're not going to give the millions of dollars to the Israeli government. It's complicated. It was, the other thing that Augusta, Victoria does is kidney dialysis for children. There's a lot of kidney disease in the Palestinian population, apparently. And they're the only place that does that kind of work. This is the view. Pretty cool. There are actual olive trees there. They do an olive harvest. There's a bell tower that you can see everything from. On a couple of occasions, Israeli soldiers have tried to take over Augusta, Victoria and lay claim to the bell tower. And they have, so far, Augusta, Victoria has been able to hold that off. This is coming out of Augusta, Victoria, down the Mount of Olives. This is what it looks like. The first view of the Dome of the Rock, right? The most photographed building in the world, you can see there. And below it is the Kidron Valley, and where the Garden of Gethsemane is. And suddenly it all makes a lot more sense, doesn't it? You can just see Jesus up here looking down into Jerusalem, which is up on a hill. You can see the wall along the edge. And in front of this, I've got pictures. These are Jewish graves. You see that they're marked in the stones? And in this area, these are all Muslim graves. It's this giant graveyard. Because it isn't just Christians that believe the Messiah will come back into Jerusalem. The Jews believe this is where God will return and restore the New Jerusalem. The Muslims believe that God will come back and restore. And some of them say he'll come through this gate over here, which is all bricked up, which is interesting. The Christian Zionists who are with us got really excited at this point.